Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. It is I, Emily Sophia, aka M Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys the final episode of Season 2 of Better Call Saul. We are indeed at Season 2, Episode 10, Klick, with a K. So, spoiler alert, before I dive into the magic of things, as I shall be bearing all in this review, and I would encourage you guys, after you check out this video, if you've got the time, if you've got the space in your brain for this, I wrote and uploaded a new song to my channel. It's called Fingertip Galaxies. There's a link in the description, but I know that we have more pressing matters to attend to, so better freaking call Saul. Or, as we would say after this episode, Gimme Jimmy. Which I am totally into. Got a real nice ring to it, but whoa man, emotionally, coming off of this episode, I am seething. There is smoke of anger pouring out of pores in my body that I did not even know existed. And I'm amazed that the fire department has not showed up yet, because whoa daddy, Chuck McGill. He is a freaking supervillain in the making and completely ensnared Jimmy in the ultimate trap, which of course is going to bring baby and cradle crashing all the way down. I am both looking forward to the ride and not looking forward to things because Chuck is such an evil bastard. But man, what an incredibly well-crafted, well-wrought finale. So many crazy things came to light, and I would like to, of course, address the very, very popular fan theory that the note that a certain Mike Ehrmantraut received in the desert comes from a Mr. Fring? Gustav Fring, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, a lot of people brought this to my attention, and it was all over the internet, the fact that the episode titles for each episode of the season, you take the first letter, you get Fring's back. So, I mean, it's a little tough to avoid, you know? I was keeping my expectations open, but when you think about it, logically speaking, that is just about the only other original character from Breaking Bad that would take such an action. Something so subtle and disturbing, and something to indicate control over a situation. Control that Mike by no means expected that anybody else would have. An upper hand out here in the desert, where Mike figures it's just him and his rifle, you know? It's pretty staggering stuff. Yeah, I definitely think that Fring is back, that he's going to be back, and that was just about the perfect cliffhanger that the show could pull at this point. I am extremely excited to see how they're going to weave him into the narrative of this series. Anxious to see, you know, the inception of the Mike that we came to know and love through Breaking Bad. And to see how Gus could play a role in his transformation. Because there Mike is, you know, he's riding high on the tidal wave of a victory and doesn't exactly realize the challenges that await him now that he is crossing into treacherous territory with the cartel and was actually looking to take out Hector Salamanca himself. Now, of course, we know that there are certain players who survive into the future. We don't know what incidents or accidents may take place along the road, but we now see that Mike is not alone. Maybe he's got himself a friend, a business partner, as it were, a new employer, who knows. But Yes, so that is something that I wanted to address. Very psyched about. I loved the scenes too where we got a lot of point of view shots with Mike where we were either looking through the scope of his gun down at what was going on with Nacho and Hector and everybody taking that guy out into the desert to do the business. And then there were other times where we got to see Mike's eye crazy magnified, and that was a fun visual effect to just show how it would seem that he is the all-seeing eye in this situation. But then that's when we hear the alarm sound in the distance, and we know that something is terribly, terribly wrong, even if it doesn't seem like it. So Mike is kind of off his bearings when he gets back to his car, and he finds that giant stick against his car alarm, and is left kind of spinning, gun drawn, ready to face whoever's there. But, you know, they disappear as if on the wind, and we'll see where that's going to take us next. But, of course, at the core of this episode was the unfolding war between brothers, between Jimmy and Chuck. And I think that ultimately we come to see that Chuck McGill very well may be the better con man between the two of them. But it is my firm belief that he is in the process of digging his own grave. And I don't care if it's lined with his precious foil to keep the electromagnetic energy out. I don't freaking care. As long as he is 6 feet under before this show is done. That is all I could ask for with this man, because what a bastard. We start the episode off with a flashback to the death of their mother. And she, of course, wakes up right before she kicks the bucket. And who other does she call for than Jimmy? You know, it's just like his commercial that aired during his marathon weight session at the hospital, you know, Gimme Jimmy. That's what his mom wanted. But of course Chuck was the only one present and was insisting on making his presence known to his mother, but too little too late. And yet pride reigned over the day when Jimmy comes rushing in, you know, with his scarf blowing around. It's like, what happened? What happened? And he's pressing for information. And Chuck is not going to give his own freaking brother the satisfaction of knowing that his name was the last word on their mother's lips. No, it's not going to go down in the history books like that for Chuck. And so we get further context through which to understand precisely why it is that Chuck despises his brother so, and is so completely and utterly pitted against him, and so completely and utterly set out to destroy him. And you know, it's mind-blowing to me what Chuck had said earlier on in, I forget if it was the last episode or the episode before the penultimate episode, but when Chuck was telling Jimmy that he would do the exact same thing for Jimmy if he was in his shoes, as far as taking care of him and looking after him. And we see absolutely no evidence that Chuck would ever make good on that kind of promise. And really, that's just him kind of scratching the back of his own ego, which is what Chuck lives for. He lives to please number one. And ultimately, even through his insane psychosomatic panic attacks, even through the genuine psychological pain that completely racks his body, and that upside down point of view shot that we got in the emergency room, and we see the agony and the stress and the pain that he endures, he comes out on the other side of that ready to bring the hammer down. Chuck is that crazy kind of psychopath who can harness his own pain and turn it into the pain of someone who he believes has wronged him. And that's precisely why he has the fuel. He has the ability to totally frame Jimmy. It's just staggering stuff. I hate it. It's brilliant. He is brilliant. And it's like you would think that he's so brilliant that he could somehow conquer his sensitivity to electricity. And I mean, these things are not it like that is by no means to belittle his condition or to say like, oh, he should just get over it. But it's crazy how he can be so lucid, so aware of his own restrictions, his own confines, that he can use those things to prey on the vulnerabilities of others, to the point that so he thinks that he is getting justice, that he is going to get Jimmy his just desserts, and that all is going to be right with the world because of his actions, when in fact he is slipping far, far further than slipping Jimmy ever has and ever could, with the whole construct of his anti-electricity room and the way that he seems to turn his entire home into a manifestation of the inside of his tortured mind, and he abruptly quits HHM and believes that he can no longer be in the law because the electricity is eroding his brain. I made this one mistake. I mean, who's the real showman in the family here? Arguably both of them, but at the same time, motherfucking Chuck. I'm just saying, this guy is a mastermind of maniacal, diabolical proportions. He has even crafted his, layer of doom, and, he invites Jimmy into this place, only to get him to confess. Even when Jimmy makes it clear that the reason why, yes, he did all of this, yes, he committed a felony on Kim's behalf, he ultimately says, like, hey, the only reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to know that you're an amazing person and the world needs you and you're intelligent and you're sharp and you're on it, and cut the crap. And still after Jimmy leaves, Chuck so eagerly uncovers the recorder with which he captured the confession and hits the stop button. And that is the cliffhanger that we are going to be hanging from for months on end. But what a brilliant one at that, because this sets the ball rolling for the destruction of two men in one, and Chuck, thinking that he is digging Jimmy's grave, in fact, is, he's going to make a bed right on next to him. It's crazy how in a single episode we can go from trying to feel for Chuck, although he is so good at being so difficult to sympathize with. So good. But we feel for him, especially because of the way that Jimmy reacts. There's no tricks, no ruse, no gambit, no game. It's just brotherly care and love. Jimmy freaking loves this guy. He pours hours on end into making sure that Chuck gets exactly what he needs. And Chuck, he knows this. Every time he's like, oh, you're just gonna put me in the asylum, you're gonna send me away. He knows that Jimmy wouldn't do that. He knows how to exploit this one weakness in the ultimate adversary a guy who, quite frankly, cares too much. At this point, that kind of feels like Jimmy's only key flaw here. It's like, yeah, he's been skirting around the edges of the law for a while. He plays it fast and loose. We've known this since the get-go, and that's why we're here, because we love that side of him. But he has these cracks into his soul. He has these things that Chuck can pry open, that he can play with, that he can turn in his favor. So I would say at this point, I think that Chuck is one of the best TV villains on air right now. He's a mastermind, I tell you what. We didn't get as much of a focus on Kim this time around because of all the familial dealings and the fallout of Chuck's accident and the ultimate guilt tripping, which is going to lead to Jimmy's impending demise. And I mean, man, just powerful stuff, really top-notch cinematography and visuals. Just the visual narrative of this episode was just about as powerful as we've ever seen the show go. I mean, even without the quintessential montages and other pieces of other types of storytelling that Vince Gilligan and co. like to use, even without that, those particular styles and elements, this episode, I think, really stands on its own, really gets us asking questions. I want to know about Chuck. What happened to Rebecca? Because I feel like the writers are gonna hold that out as like a last missing piece to the puzzle. You know, I can feel it in my bones. But yeah, man, just a crushing, intense, well-paced episode that completely unveils Chuck's true nature. He is precisely who we have suspected him to be all along, and this really is just kind of, you know, filling in the color of his menace, of the threat that he presents, and his relentless obsession of driving Jimmy into the ground is going to be a driving force for a lot of the conflict that we see coming further down the line. And he is going to truly be the author of Saul Goodman in so many ways, I think. He's going to be the one who drives Kim away. He is going to be the one to ultimately cut Jimmy's last remaining threads to a sense of family, of belonging, of community. He is going to sever all of those ties, and away the hot air balloon is going to fly into the sky. And of course, we know exactly what's coming on down the line. It's the question of how do we get there? Yeah, so that's my breakdown. If there's any other big scenes, details, things that I missed, I would be more than happy for you guys to bring those things up in the comments below. It's been an absolute pleasure to review this season and to discuss it with you guys. You've been so incredible. I will definitely, hands down, be back for season 3. I'll also be back this upcoming weekend, I think it is, for Game of Thrones. So if you're watching that, stick around. Check out my new song. I'm going to be doing some other reviews in the future too. So lots of stuff. Okay, you guys are great. Thanks for listening to my rants and ravings. And as always, I'll be back before you know it.